She would snap at him for the smallest things, criticize him constantly, and spend money as if it grew on trees. In the heart of Calabar town, where the palm trees sway and the river whispers secrets, there lived a man named Ufot. Now, Ufot wasn't just any man. He was kind, hardworking, and his heart was as big as the sky. But there was one thing missing in his life, and that's a wife. Ufot had been searching for a wife for what seemed like an eternity. Every time he found someone he thought could be the one, they would slip through his fingers like water. Some said they were too busy. Others said they weren't ready. It seemed like the universe was playing a cruel joke on poor Ufot. One day, as Ufot walked through the bustling streets of Calabar, he met a woman named Uduak. She was beautiful, with her eyes like the midnight sky and a smile that could light up the darkest night. "Hello, handsome," Uduak said, her voice as sweet as honey. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the street. My name is Uduak. What's yours?" Ufot felt his heart skip a bit as he looked into her eyes. "My name is Ufot," he replied, his voice catching in his throat. From that moment on, Ufot and Uduak were inseparable. They spent every moment together, laughing and talking as if they had known each other their whole lives. Ufot was convinced that he had finally found the one. But little did he know that Uduak was not who she seemed. Behind her beautiful smile hid a darkness, a cunning and deceitful nature that would soon reveal itself. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, Ufot began to notice things about Uduak that he had never seen before. She would snap at him for the smallest things, criticize him constantly, and spend money as if it grew on trees. But Ufot ignored the warning signs, convincing himself that he was just being paranoid. After all, he had waited so long to find someone like Uduak. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her. And so, in a moment of desperation and longing, Ufot asked Uduak to marry him. And to his surprise, she said yes. But little did he know that he had just walked into a trap. Uduak's true nature would soon reveal itself in ways that Ufot could never have imagined. And so begins the unbearable story of Ufot and Uduak, a story of love, deceit, and the harsh realities of marriage. But will Ufot realize the truth before it's too late? Only time will tell. After their wedding, Ufot began to notice a change in Uduak. What once seemed like harmless mannerisms now revealed themselves as signs of something shady. One evening, as Ufot returned home from a long day at work, he found Uduak sitting in the living room, surrounded by bags from expensive stores. "What's all this?" Ufot asked, his heart sinking as he looked at the piles of clothes and accessories. Uduak flashed him a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, just a little shopping spree," she replied casually. "I thought I deserved a treat." Ufot's stomach churned as he thought about the money they didn't have being spent on frivolous things. But he pushed his concerns aside, not wanting to start a fight. But the spending didn't stop there. Uduak continued to rack up debts in Ufot's name, buying things they didn't need and couldn't afford. And every time Ufot tried to talk to her about it, she would brush him off, telling him not to worry. But worry was all Ufot could do. He watched helplessly as their savings dwindled and their debts piled up. All the while, Uduak's spending habits spiraled out of control. And as if that wasn't enough, Ufot also began to notice Uduak's cruel characteristic. She would belittle him in the front of their friends, mock his dreams and aspirations for the future, and withhold affection as punishment for the smallest perceived insult. But through it all, Ufot remained hopeful. He believed that if he just loved Uduak enough, she would change. He held on to the idea that their marriage could still be saved, despite all the warning signs pointing to the contrary. But little did Ufot know that he was in for even a rougher ride. For Uduak's true intentions were far more frightening than he could ever have imagined. And as the days turned into months, Ufot would come to learn that sometimes love is not enough to save a marriage from the grip of deceit and manipulation. As time passed, Ufot began to lose hope in their marriage. And now, it was being replaced by a troubling sense of fear. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with his marriage, but he didn't know how to fix it. One day, Ufot came home early from work, hoping to surprise Uduak with a romantic dinner. But what he found when he walked through the door shattered his heart into a million pieces. There, in the living room, sat Uduak, laughing and flirting with another man. Ufot's blood ran cold as he watched them together, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Uduak, what's going on?" Ufot asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. Uduak turned to him, her eyes cold and calculating. "Oh, Ufot, you're home early," she said, her tone dripping with fake innocence. "This is just a friend of mine. We are just catching up." But Ufot knew better. He could see the truth written in the other man's eyes, in the way Uduak leaned into him with a familiarity that made Ufot's stomach to churn. Without a word, Ufot turned and walked out of the house, his heart heavy with grief and betrayal. He couldn't believe that the woman he had loved and trusted could do something so wicked. For days, Ufot wandered the streets of Calabar, lost in a cloud of pain and confusion. He couldn't understand how he had been so blind, how he had let himself fall for Uduak's lies. But as he wandered, he began to see things more clearly. He realized that Uduak had never truly loved him. She had seen him as nothing more than a means to an end, a way to satisfy her own desires at his expense. And with that realization came a sense of freedom. Ufot knew that he deserved better than Uduak's deceit and manipulation. He deserved a love that was honest and true, a love that would lift him up instead of tearing him down. And so, with a newfound sense of determination, Ufot made the hardest decision of his life. He would leave Uduak behind and start anew, leaving behind the pain and heartache of their failed marriage. But little did Ufot know that the hardest part was yet to come. For Uduak would never let him go so easily. She had plans for Ufot, plans that would ensure he never escaped her grip again. As the sun set over Calabar, Ufot prepared himself for the battle that lay ahead. He knew that the road ahead would be so long and difficult, but he was ready to face it head on. For he was Ufot, and he would not be defeated by the likes of Uduak. With resolve unfolded in his heart, Ufot returned home to confront Uduak. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was prepared to face whatever came his way. As he stepped into their house, Ufot found Uduak lounging on the couch, a fake smile playing on her lips. She looked up to him, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Well, well, well, look who decided to come crawling back," Uduak said, her voice dripping with disdain. But Ufot didn't recoil. He stood tall, his gaze resolute. "I'm not here to play your games anymore, Uduak," he said, his voice steady. "I know the truth now, and I won't let you manipulate me any longer." Uduak's fake smile faltered, replaced by a look of pure rage. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shouted, springing to her feet. "You think you can just saunter in here and accuse me? You're nothing without me, Ufot, nothing." But Ufot didn't back down. He had spent too long under Uduak's thumb, too long allowing her to control his life. He refused to let her hold power over him any longer. With the strength he didn't know he possessed, Ufot stood his ground. He told Uduak that he was leaving her and that he deserved better than her lies and deceit. But Uduak wasn't about to let him go without a fight. She hurled insults and accusations at him, trying to break his spirit and force him to stay. But Ufot remained steadfast, his determination unshaken. He gathered his belongings and walked out the door, leaving Uduak behind in a cloud of anger and resentment. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Ufot felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He was free. Free from Uduak's toxic influence. Free to forge his own path in life. But little did he know that the battle was far from over. For Uduak would stop at nothing to get her revenge, to ensure that Ufot paid dearly for daring to stand against her. And as Ufot walked away from his old life, he knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But he also knew that he was strong enough to face whatever challenges lay in his path. For he was Ufot, and he would not be defeated. As Ufot started his new life without Uduak, he found himself facing a lot of mixed emotions. Relief for finally breaking free from her hold. Anger for allowing himself to be deceived for so long. And sadness for the love he had lost. But in the middle of the mix of his emotions, Ufot also felt a ray of hope. Hope for a brighter future that is not contaminated by Uduak's deceit and manipulation. With every passing day, Ufot began to rebuild his life bit by bit. He surrounded himself with friends and family who supported him, who lifted him up when he felt like drowning in hopelessness. As time went by, Ufot began to heal. The wounds left by Uduak's betrayal slowly began to fade away, replaced by reminders of the strength he had found within himself. But while Ufot was busy picking up the pieces of his shattered life, Uduak was planning her revenge. She couldn't bear the thought of Ufot moving on without her, of finding happiness without her by his side. And so, in the darkness of night, Uduak set her plan into motion. She spread lies and rumors about Ufot, painting him as the cause of their broken down marriage. She disrupted his relationships and undermined his efforts to rebuild his life, all in an attempt to drag him back down into the darkness with her. But Ufot refused to let Uduak's actions define him. He stood tall in the face of challenges, refusing to let her break him once again. And as time went on, Ufot emerged from the ashes of his old life, stronger and more resilient than ever before. For he had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true love does not seek to control or manipulate, but rather true love uplifts and empowers. And as he looked towards the future with hope in his heart, Ufot knew that he would never again fall victim to the deceitful charms of another wrong marriage. With each passing day, Ufot embraced his newfound freedom more and more. He threw himself into his work, pouring his energy into his passions and pursuits. But in the middle of the hustle and bustle of his busy life, Ufot never forgot the lessons he had learned from his painful marriage to Uduak. He made up his mind to never again ignore the warning signs of a toxic relationship, to never again allow himself to be blinded by desperation and longing. And as he focused on building a life for himself, Ufot discovered a sense of purpose he had never known before. He found joy in the simple pleasures of life, in the laughter of friends, in the warmth of the sun on his skin, and in the quiet moments of being alone. But just as Ufot began to settle into his new life, he received an unexpected visitor, Uduak. At first, Ufot was careful of her presence. He was unsure of what she could possibly want from him after all they've been through together. But as Uduak stood before him, her eyes filled with regret and remorse, Ufot felt a twinge of compassion stir within him. Uduak fell to her knees and begged for Ufot's forgiveness, pleading for a second chance to make things right again. She confessed to her wrongdoing, admitting that she had let her own insecurities and fears drive her to hurt the person that she loved. And as Ufot listened to Uduak's words, he felt a sense of understanding run all over him. He realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only hold him back from moving forward in his life. And therefore, with a heart full of forgiveness, Ufot gave Uduak a second chance. He knew that it wouldn't be easy, that rebuilding trust would take time and effort. But he also believed that everyone deserved a second chance, especially when they showed genuine remorse for their actions. And as Uduak hugged Ufot tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks, Ufot knew that this was just the beginning of their journey towards healing and reconciliation. For sometimes, out of the darkest moments come the brightest rays of hope. And as Ufot and Uduak started a new journey, they knew that together they could overcome any obstacle that stood in their way. Ufot and Uduak faced a lot of challenges along the way of their new journey. Rebuilding trust and repairing the mistakes caused by years of deceit and betrayal was not easy, but they decided and were determined to make it work. Together, they attended counseling sessions where they learned to communicate openly and honestly with each other. They dived deep into the root causes of their problems, addressing insecurities and fears held by both of them. But it wasn't just the counseling sessions that brought them closer together. Ufot and Uduak also made a conscious effort to spend quality time with each other, rekindling their love and affection that had once bound them together as one. They went on long walks by the riverside, holding hands and sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. They cooked meals together, laughing and joking as they experimented with new recipes in the kitchen. And slowly but surely, their efforts began to pay off. The walls that had once stood between them began to crumble, and it was replaced by a newfound sense of intimacy and heart connection. But their journey was far from over. They knew that rebuilding their marriage would take time and patience, and that there would be challenges along the way. But they decided to remain committed to each other and to their marriage. They refused to let the mistakes of the past define their future, choosing instead to focus on the love and forgiveness that had brought them back together again. And as they walked hand in hand down the journey of their renewed love, they knew that no matter what circumstances lay ahead, they would face them together as partners, as lovers, and as friends. Just as Ufot and Uduak seemed to have found their balance in their renewed relationship, a shadow from Ufot's past arose to challenge their newfound happiness. One day, as Ufot was leaving his office, he received a message on his phone from an unfamiliar number. Curious, he opened it to find a text from none other than one of his former lovers, Nkoyo. Nkoyo's message was filled with longing and regret, confessing that she had never stopped thinking about Ufot and the love they once shared. She begged him to meet her, promising that seeing him again would bring a closure to the unresolved feelings that she still had for him. At first, Ufot was surprised by Nkoyo's sudden reappearance in his life. He had moved on from their relationship long ago and had no desire to revisit the pain of his past. But as he read and reread Nkoyo's messages, he couldn't shake the feeling of curiosity that disturbed him. And he thought to himself, what harm could one meeting do? He wondered. After all, he was committed to Uduak now, wasn't he? Unknown to Ufot, Nkoyo's intentions were far from innocent. She saw Ufot's simplicity as an opportunity to rekindle their old flame, to entice him away from Uduak and back into her arms. And so, despite the warnings ringing in the back of his mind, Ufot agreed to meet Nkoyo, convinced that he could resist the pull of her lust. But as he walked into the dimly lit cafe where they had agreed to meet, Ufot felt a sense of uneasiness rush all over him. He knew that he was playing with fire, that one wrong move could destroy everything he had worked so hard to rebuild with Uduak. And yet, as he saw Nkoyo across the room, all thoughts of consequence faded away, replaced by a familiar longing that he thought he had buried long ago. Little did Ufot know he was about to be tested in ways he could never have imagined. And the choices he will make in the moments that follow would have far-reaching consequences both for him and Uduak, threatening to scatter the peace that they have fought so hard to find. Questioned everything, from how they cook their meals to how they even care for their own home. Nkoyo's face fell, her eyes filling with tears. But Ufot, I love you. As Ufot sat across from Nkoyo in the dimly lit cafe, a variety of emotions ran within him. He was torn between the knowledge of his past with Nkoyo and the promise of a future he is building with Uduak. Nkoyo, sensing Ufot's confusion, drew closer to him, her eyes filled with longing. Ufot, I've missed you so much, she whispered, her voice soft and tempting. I know we've made mistakes in the past, but I believe we can make things right this time. Please give our love another chance. Ufot felt his strength getting weak under Nkoyo's tempting look. Memories of their past love flooded his mind. The laughter, the passion, the deep connection they had in the past. But then, like a light in the darkness, Uduak's face flashed before his eyes. The love and support she is now showing him and her changed behavior towards him. Suddenly, Ufot knew what he had to do. With a heavy heart, he moved himself away from the table, his voice steady as he spoke. Nkoyo, I can't do this, he said, his words filled with conviction. I've moved on from our past and I'm committed to building a future with Uduak. I'm sorry, but I can't go back. Nkoyo's face fell, her eyes filling with tears. But Ufot, I love you, she pleaded, reaching out to grab his hand. Don't you still love me? Ufot hesitated for a moment, his heart torn between his past and his present. But then, with a sigh, he gently pulled his hand away from Nkoyo's grasp. I'll always care for you, Nkoyo, he said softly, but my heart belongs to someone else now. I hope you can find happiness too, but it won't be with me. And with that, Ufot turned and walked away, leaving Nkoyo behind in the darkness of the cafe. As he stepped out, he felt a sense of peace all over him, knowing that he had made the right choice. And as he made his way back to Uduak, he knew that their love had been tested and proven to be true. For in the end, it was not the seduction of the past that had won, but the promise of a future built on honesty, trust, and unshakable love. As he got home, Ufot felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had chosen Uduak and their future together over the temptation of the past. As he opened the door, he was greeted by the warmth of their home and the loving presence of Uduak. Uduak looked up from where she sat, concern written all over her face. Ufot, is everything okay? She asked, sensing the uneasiness in his eyes. Taking a deep breath, Ufot walked over to Uduak and held her hands. I need to tell you something, he began, his voice steady. I met with Nkoyo, my former girlfriend, today. Uduak's eyes widened in surprise, but she remained silent, giving Ufot the space to continue. I was tempted, Uduak, Ufot confessed, his voice filled with remorse. But in the end, I chose you. I chose us. Tears welled up in Uduak's eyes as she reached out to embrace Ufot. Oh, Ufot, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. I'm so proud of you. Thanks for choosing me. And in that moment, as they held each other tightly, Ufot and Uduak felt the strength of their love renewed. They had faced temptation and came out stronger on the other side, confirming their commitment to each other and their future together. As they sat together, enjoying each other's love, Ufot and Uduak knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, hand in hand, united in the bond of love and forgiveness. For their love had stood the test of time, a love that would endure forever. As the months rolled by, Ufot and Uduak's relationship flourished. Their bond, strengthened by the temptations they had overcome, seemed unbreakable. Yet, life had more challenges in store for them. One morning, Ufot received a call from his mother, informing him of his father's sudden illness. Without delay, Ufot and Uduak rushed to his parents' home to offer their support. As they stood by his father's bedside, Ufot felt a mix of emotions overwhelm him. Memories of his childhood flooded back, the love and guidance his father had provided, the sacrifices he had made to ensure his family's well-being. Ufot's father smiled weakly, his eyes filled with pride as he looked at his son and daughter-in-law. I'm sorry to disturb both of you like this, he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. But I am grateful to have you here with me. Ufot squeezed his father's hand, his heart heavy with sadness. Don't apologize, Dad, he replied, his voice filled with emotion. We are here for you no matter what. So they quickly rushed his father to the hospital to continue caring for him. And so Ufot and Uduak spent their days and nights by his father's side in the hospital, offering him comfort and support in the time of his need. But just as Ufot's father's health began to stabilize and show signs of improvement, Ufot's mother collapsed suddenly her frail body unable to withstand the stress of taking care of her husband. She was immediately admitted into the same hospital to receive care, and thankfully, she was soon back on her feet again, hale and hearty. As days went by, Ufot's father's health began to decline, and he needed to stay in the hospital to be observed and cared for by the doctors and given more medication because of his illness. As Ufot and Uduak navigated through the challenges of caring for Ufot's parents, they faced an unexpected twist. Ufot's mother, Mama Eka, decided to move in with them indefinitely. Mama Eka arrived at their doorstep with her bags packed and a determined expression on her face. "I can't bear to be alone while your father is in the hospital," she declared, ignoring any protests from Ufot and Uduak. And besides, I need to make sure you are taking care of him properly." Despite their unpreparedness, Ufot and Uduak welcomed Mama Eka into their home, knowing that family came first no matter the circumstances. But as the days turned into weeks, things began to get out of hand. Mama Eka's presence was overwhelming. Her constant corrections and complaining was becoming unbearable to Ufot and Uduak. She questioned everything, from how they cook their meals to how they even care for their own home. Uduak tried her best to accommodate Mama Eka's needs while still maintaining some kind of independence. But it seems that nothing she did was ever good enough. Ufot, caught in the middle of this conflict between his mother and his wife, struggled to find a balance. He wanted to honor his responsibility to his parents while also protecting his marriage and his own sanity. But as the tension in their home reached a boiling point, Ufot and Uduak realized that something had to give way. They couldn't continue living like this under Mama Eka's overwhelming presence, constantly second-guessing themselves and their decisions. And so, with emotion filling their hearts and a sense of determination, Ufot and Uduak made the difficult decision to confront Mama Eka and set boundaries for her behavior in their home. It was a tense and emotional conversation, filled with tears and raised voices, but in the end, Mama Eka unwillingly agreed to respect their wishes, understanding that her presence was causing more harm than good. It was time for her to move back home, and they decided to be occasionally visiting her to check on how she's doing, while ensuring that they take good care of Papa in the hospital. As they settled back into their normal lives, Ufot and Uduak knew that their journey was far from over. But they also knew that they were stronger together, united in their love and commitment to one another, no matter what challenges they faced.